Okay, ladies, welcome to this week's podcast. I have an amazing guest for you. Some of you may know her, some of you may not. Okay, so you may have heard her before. Her name is Marisa Bailey Coaching. Have you heard of her? If you haven't, you're going to know loads more. So Marisa is the CEO and founder of Marisa Bailey Coaching. She is a certified authentic leadership coach. She's trained and certified in emotional intelligence. Now, we all need to learn and grow in that area, definitely. She has extensive professional experience building and leading teams, businesses, development, and process optimization too. She is personally fascinated and continues to educate herself on the science of the brain, psychology, and the whole science of well-being too. Marisa works with coaches and consultants to help them confidently build and scale a business based on the foundation of their core values. Like, we all need that. We need to know our core values and build your business on those. Her approach includes, it's kind of like a threefold method, but she'll go more into this as well. Her approach includes value identification, vision embodiment, and aligned strategy too. She believes when all these three fundamentals are centered, we all have the ability to create a life and business full of abundance. Like, we all want a life of abundance, fulfillment, and integrity too. She's here to help you unravel your limiting beliefs through mindset coaching and an unshakable business foundation through an aligned strategy too. Simply said, she's the person you hire when you're tired of wishing and waiting and you're ready to start being all you were meant to be. Ladies, I give you Marisa Bailey. Welcome, Marisa.
Hello. I feel like if I could have you introduce me everywhere I go, that would just be perfect.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So how are you doing today?
I am wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. It's another beautiful day in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I get to speak with you.
Yay. Excellent, excellent, excellent. It's so great to have you on the podcast. I'm really excited to learn everything that you're going to share. There's so many different parts I wanted to kind of go through, but I think, first of all, I think one of the key things our listeners really want to find out is kind of linked about with like confidence, and like, how do you learn to confidently be yourself without being kind of aggressive kind of thing?
That's a really good question. Just like kick right off into it. So really learning to be confident with yourself is really an external short win. It's a long-term sustainable piece of work that we do on ourselves every single day. And so some things that I really work with my clients on, and really wanting to be more of themselves from a more authentic perspective, how they view themselves. I really tie in the emotional intelligence piece of it, how you perceive yourself, how you speak to yourself, how you react to different situations and experiences in life, is really to have that internal chatter in a very kind way, really showing yourself self-compassion. Yeah. And when I mean showing yourself self-compassion is being so kind to yourself when you're speaking to yourself. And a really solid exercise that I coach my clients on, and I've used for the longest time now, is really when you have that conversation with yourself, if it's not something that you would say to somebody that you love, don't say it to yourself. You would not walk up to your best friend and like, wow, you really bombed that, or that failed. You're not good enough to do this. You would never say that to somebody that you love. So why would you say it to yourself? So really, really embodying that confidence from a place of a solid foundation of really recognizing who you are and where you are right now is so important. And really just being mindful about being present with yourself, not looking backward, not looking forward, but really being present in the moment here and now, and practicing that self-compassion talk and those exercises, and recognizing that failure is temporary and there is no failure without an opportunity for growth. Absolutely. Some of my biggest moments, in air quotes, failures, have been some of my most incredible growth moments, incredible learning moments. And I think that really reframing failure in our lives to a moment of opportunity for learning and growth is so important to really even start at step one of really being confident with where we are.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds so simple and so realistic, but I know myself, some of the stuff you said, I'm just like, I'm not doing that. I love the point you said about the internal chatter. Be kind, what you say to yourself, and would you say that to your best friend? And honestly, some of the stuff I know that in my own mind, I'd be like, oh no, I've done that wrong. I wouldn't express that to my best friend in that way, definitely not. And just being kind to yourself. Yeah, definitely. I love that. And I know it's so true, but being present in the moment, because I've noticed that at times of lockdown, my mind can be doing 101 things. Like I can be doing my work, and I'm thinking like, okay, I've got to go and do this at the shop between this time, etc. But that was so key. Be present in the moment, self-compassion. And I love the point you said about failure is only temporary. It's an opportunity to learn. That is really brilliant and really, really helpful. I really hope our listeners are really taking on board that point. That's key. Definitely, definitely. And then as well, I was thinking as well, just kind of moving on from like, you talked about having confidence about yourself and the internal chatter and thing. And I was wondering about, often women can say a lot of things in their own mind, maybe not always come out as well. But I was wondering how did you find a way to be heard and seen as a young female, often in a male-dominated industry? Like, sort of, what tips would you give for a female who's in a, I don't know, maybe something like construction or mechanical engineering? What sort of advice would you give for that particular female in that area of business?
Yeah, wonderful question. So this is one thing that I love speaking about, and I could probably have an entire talk show about this, is really to give some background. The industries that I worked in for years is I worked in the oil and gas industry.
Wow.
And also the video game industry. So two industries that are well known for being primarily a male-dominated industry.
Mm-hmm.
So when I entered into those industries, I had no intention of it whatsoever. I just kind of fell into those, and I'm so grateful that I did, because I really grew and flourished as a leader, not only professionally, but also personally. How was I leading in my life?
Mm-hmm.
So when I entered the oil and gas industry was the first role that I held, where I was working with primarily all males, roles where I would just kind of like lay down and let things just kind of roll. I was very much a yes person, a people pleaser. And for whatever reason, in a moment, I remember walking into work one day and saying something as simple as, you know what? No, I'm not going to eat my lunch at my desk this day. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go out into the kitchen and start a conversation with one of the guys out there.
Yeah.
And I continued doing that, of really stretching myself outside of my comfort zone. And I feel like one of the tips that I to it is saying, if you have that moment where you're having an inkling, I really speak a lot about intuition. So trusting your gut, trusting your intuition. If you have a feeling that's saying, why don't you go do this? Think about if you do this, or you have a vision of, for me, it was, well, what are the pros and cons of me sitting at my desk and just working through lunch by myself versus getting up and getting out there to get to know somebody? And obviously the pros outweighed the cons. And so it was really getting up and stretching myself out of that comfort zone, introducing myself, having awkward small talk if I needed to, and just embracing it for all that it was. From that moment on, I grew tremendously in being a leader, of making my own decisions and being confident in what I was doing. I quickly grew that role out of a office manager into business development for the West Coast division. I worked with top executives in that industry. I had my own, what do you call those, coveralls and steel-toed boots and hard hat. And I was out there in the oil refineries learning, because I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. And the same thing in the gaming industry is really, a saying that I have is, instead of waiting to be invited to the table, just take your own chair. Stop asking for permission. You don't need permission. If you feel so strongly about something that you can add value, even if you're not sure if you're going to have the quote unquote right answer, but you have a voice, use it. Because if we keep holding back our voices and our values and the knowledge and the benefits that we can share with the world at any scale, whether that's speaking up in a 2-person meeting or speaking up in front of the board of directors in a meeting, do it. I encourage every single person to do that, because that moment of fear, that moment where
Yeah.
you can feel your body reacting like, oh boy, you're raising your hand, or oh, meant to do that. And
Yeah.
it's so incredibly powerful when you have that moment of using your voice and saying like, wow, I did that. And the first time you do it, you can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Definitely. Just taking even just the small thing of starting a conversation, making the decision not to eat your lunch at your desk, but to go and find someone else to connect with and stuff. That's really like, that's a huge step out in like faith and stuff, like definitely. And stretching yourself out of the comfort zone. And that's where the growth comes. That's where like your own kind of self-training, the leadership comes as well. And I love it. And I love that you said as well, stop holding yourself back, because that's the only person that is holding us back. Like if you know that you've got something to say, to share a value or a skill or an expertise, definitely go out and give that. I really, really love that point. And trust your intuition, because sometimes you can be like, oh, I'm not too sure, but just do it anyway in the fear. I love that, definitely. And I loved as well, just moving on from like kind of the tips that you gave
Yeah.
there about speaking in a male-dominated industry. I was thinking as well, like what kind of some more tips I'm going to ask you about. What other tips can you give about speaking confidently about who you are without kind of sounding kind of like I'm the big boss, you know?
Yeah, I think that question in and of itself kind of has a tip in there where how would you want to be approached or entered
Yeah.
into a conversation with somebody in a way that feels really good for you. So if you wouldn't speak a certain way to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
then don't speak that way to anybody else, if that kind of makes sense. So to
Yeah.
articulate that a little bit better, it can kind of go back to that best friend conversation. If you wouldn't say this to your best friend in the way
Yeah.
that you're anticipating approaching this, then don't approach that conversation. Really making that decision to enter into any kind of conversation is
Mm-hmm.
up to you. How do you want to be perceived? How do you want people to perceive how you're communicating with them? Again, it's
Mm-hmm.
communicating with people, not talking at people. Leaders don't talk at people. True, authentic leaders do not speak at people. They engage their individuals in conversations, whether it's a teammate, a team member, a direct report, or somebody
Mm-hmm.
above them. Whatever it is, being a true leader is really engaging in conversation and being okay with saying, I don't know, or let's figure
Yeah.
this out together, or I'm not sure yet. And
Yeah.
also being open to feedback. And I'm still like on a mission to figure out a better word for feedback, because
Mm-hmm.
feedback kind of has this negative connotation to it, but
Yeah.
it's really just being open to having open dialogue about
Yeah.
what's happening, and really being confident in that self, and asking for what you want and being confident in who you are comes down to the end of the day of also that value identification. What are your core values? If you're entering into a conversation that feels very inauthentic to you, and one of your core
Mm-hmm.
values is authenticity, you're going to feel very off. You're
Yeah.
probably going to have a physical reaction to it, where maybe your stomach is feeling off, or you're sweating, or you're really
Yeah.
nervous. We all know those feelings that we want to just turn and run out the door. It's because
Yeah.
one of your values is being compromised. So one thing that I work with on my clients is really sitting down and doing some value identification and asking yourself, one, am I actually embodying these values daily? And
Mm-hmm.
two, if I'm not, how can I do it more? And three, identifying any kind of situation that has felt really good with your values, or ones that have maybe felt compromised. And you'll be able to really, really identify those and put pins in them and recognize, okay, if I'm walking into it in this situation, I really need to harness onto these 4 top values of mine to really feel empowered
Yeah.
when I walk into this conversation and when I walk out of this conversation. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really good visual that I like to give to it, because I love bringing in my corporate experience and now into my entrepreneurial business. Is I really like to look at it as my board of directors is
Mm-hmm.
no longer individuals sitting in a team. My board of directors are now my values sitting in it every single day. And I harness each of those in different experiences
Ah.
and different moments to help me approach any situation, any conversation, any challenge. And that takes some work, but really recognizing and saying, okay, I want to have my values sitting at this table now. because I'm in charge of how I react. I'm in charge of how I respond, and I'm in charge of how I want to feel before, during, and after this conversation.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, that was so much in that answer, definitely. Like, I love it then you said, because I always have that struggle about being the term open to feedback, because often for me, I think the struggle was how feedback was often delivered to me. I think that makes me struggle. I'm happy with feedback. I think it's the delivery that makes me go, "Ugh." I love it, calling it maybe open dialogue and stuff like that. And the best friend check, I think I'm going to try and remember that one. Like, would I say this to my best friend? And I love it. Confidence in yourself. And I love the thing about embodying your values, the ones that felt good, the one that where you felt compromised, and what did your body react to. And I love when you gave the vision of your board of directors as an entrepreneur, which have your values sitting at each of the seat rather than kind of physical people. I've never really thought of it in that way. And that's really helpful to have that mindset shift of like, okay, these are all my values of, I'm helping, I'm serving, I'm adding value, and all of those different things. And to know what your core values are and have those who are the board of directors who I would have to go and answer back to. I really love that kind of mindset shift. That really changes the focus on how I'll be doing business, and I hope for our listeners as well too. I really love that, definitely.
Yeah, I'm really glad that resonated. To elaborate a little bit more on that too, is what I recognized with some market research and also in working with my clients and my personal experience is that a lot of my clients are individuals who are thinking about or have recently transitioned out of a corporate lifestyle into entrepreneurship. And a majority of the time, there is a internal and external struggle of looking for the external validation, because we're so used to, depending on what type of role we're in, we're so used to looking for a validation or gold stars from somebody else, may it be a manager or a coworker or a client, whatever that is. So it is a deep level of doing that work for your mind to understand that your values are truly the ones that are leading you, and you are the only one that you need to report to. And so really at the end of the day, to be confident in who you are and what you do and who you are here to serve is really to be in line with your values and to be working and speaking from a place of integrity, so that you're not compromising your true identity, who you really are. Because that, when you're embodying your true identity and your core values, you're speaking about the things that truly matter to you. You're speaking from a place of confidence. Your body language changes, and you won't be able to see me right now, but for the listeners, I'm sitting up straight. I'm recognizing that my volume's changing. I'm not speaking at a lower volume, and I'm really being intentional with the words that I choose. And you can recognize your energy going up and down when you are in true alignment with your values, and that you're speaking from a place of confidence because you're in line and you're in integrity with who you truly are.
Definitely. I love that. I love that focus about the values, that those are what are leading you, and that you need to answer back to the values. That's really, really good way to just really understand that. I've never really heard it put in that way, but I really love that kind of description of it. Really, really helpful. And I wanted to kind of, leading on from like the values and stuff, and I wanted to kind of, a lot of my listeners may be talking about they want to ask for, try and get a promotion, they want to ask for, to develop their role, they may want to ask for, a bigger amount in the contract they're trying to negotiate. I wanted to ask you this question based on that, like, can you explain the power of ask for women in the workplace, or those who are in business, or kind of juggling both and doing a side hustle?
Yes. Another wonderful topic. So simply said, to put this in the most simple terms, if you never ask, the answer will always be no.
Yeah.
So the power of ask is incredible. So it's really going to a place of taking a risk on yourself. Other people in your life have taken a risk on you many times, whether it be a risk by having any type of relationship or trust in you. You also deserve to do the same thing for yourself. So ask yourself, what is it that I really want? What is it that I need in this moment? What is going to make me feel 100% taken care of by myself? And then really ask yourself the external questions too. What is it that I want in this situation? How do I want to feel? How do I want to communicate in this? And then there's also the beautiful power of visualization when you walk into these conversations of asking. So whether it be asking for a promotion, asking for a raise, visualize yourself having that conversation. You can visualize yourself walking into the office of the individual you're having the conversation with. How is your posture? How are you sitting? What is the tone and the volume of your voice? If you shake hands, how firm is your handshake? If you're having some small talk, what are some of the questions that you're asking or joking about? Or if you're more of a direct person, how do you walk in and say, this is what I came in here to talk about today. Here is my goal. Here is my intention for this conversation. And really visualize all of those pieces playing out. It's almost like, I'm a huge visual person, if you can't tell. It's almost like you have this puzzle of that conversation, and you dump all the pieces out on a table, and in your mind you're putting them all together until you get to the very last piece, and then it's just boom, fulfillment, joy, exhilaration. And so when you walk in and you want to ask for what you want, what you need in those moments, the three key questions are, how do I want to feel in this conversation? What do I want to walk away from this conversation with? And what is my intention overall of this entire conversation, so that you know that the ball is in your court in the way that you communicate and how you respond to any question or conversation in that scenario.
Yeah. Wow. A lot in there. Really, really helpful. Like, just, I love as well that when you said, if you don't ask, you're just not going to get the answer's always going to be no. So it's definitely to ask. And I love the thing that you said about visualization. That is key. If you can't see it in your own mind, it's never going to happen like in reality, or not really the way that you plan. Definitely.
Exactly.
And I love as well what you said as well under visualization is the three things, like, how do you want to feel in this situation and also after? And then what do I want to walk away with from this conversation? And just the overall intent, because sometimes I know I've been into conversation, I'm like thinking like, okay, I just want to try and get this bit done, but I haven't thought about how do I want to feel. I know what I want to walk away with, but I haven't always considered all three of those things at the same time. And I thought that was really key that you niche that all together, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, our minds and our brains are looking for a foundation of an emotion. So every single experience that we have in life, we have a feeling that comes from that. So it's really asking yourself, well, if I've experienced scenarios like this before, how did I feel? Do I want to feel that same way or a similar way? Or is this an opportunity for me to switch things up? Because I actually want to feel empowered. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel joy. I want to feel confident, versus feeling nervous of not knowing if I asked the right questions. Did I get my point across? Did the intention that I set come through clearly in that conversation? Does that individual or individuals even know what I was asking for? So it's really getting that clarity of, how do I want to feel? And then reversing that in every single step and saying, okay, well, I want to feel confident. Here's the steps to work backwards to get me to that overall goal.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great tip about where's the goal and then work backwards to get there. I'm thinking, I just want to be here, but there's no actual clear path to get there. That's really, really key, definitely. And I know you mentioned earlier about kind of fear and nerves, which kind of leads into my next question about, like, can you truly overcome like nerves and the fear to speak, so that you can actually look and sound more confident, even though you might be kind of shaking in the inside?
I actually gave a talk about this not that long ago.
Wow.
And I've done a ton of research on this, where some of the top speakers in the world still experience jitters. When they're on stage, they're nervous. And that actually was the thing that gave me a sense of peace in any speaking that I do, because it's that self-compassion of recognizing it and naming it and saying, you know what? I'm nervous walking into this conversation, or I'm nervous walking into doing this talk. And I know I'm not alone, because other people experience this. Top speakers in the world experience, and you can even name a couple of individuals if that's what satisfies your brain. And then also taking it a step further and saying, this is temporary. I actually want to feel this way. And then again, you get to that space of saying, okay, I want to feel confident. I want to feel strong. I want to be perceived as a strong speaker. How do I get there? And work backwards. So in terms of truly overcoming, I don't believe that you truly overcome that fear. I feel like there will always be an inkling of it, but that necessarily is not necessarily a bad thing. So having that fear can almost be reframed of having that excitement. So if I were to walk on stage, or if I were to walk into this interview and just be so nervous, it could also be reframed in, am I nervous or I'm just really excited? And if I am nervous, what am I nervous about? Because there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
It's a conversation. And if you're speaking about something, again, that is in line with your values, that fear will pop up. But that fear is there for a valid reason, because fear is there to keep us safe.
Yeah.
It's our choice to decide, how do we want to react to this? How much power do we want to give to this? And if I do mess up, if I do say a word or jumble my words together or speak something backwards, that's okay. You know, the power of highlighting those mistakes often really puts people at peace, and it keeps that human element and that relatability for your audience to recognize and say, you know, she said 10 times now, and all public speakers would say, you shouldn't say you shouldn't say and then count how many times you say how can you get rid of these filler words? And it's okay, because we're all human. So I don't necessarily believe in overcoming that fear, but it's how do you harness that fear in a solid way that feels good for you, and keeping that human factor and recognizing that some of the top leaders, well-known people, and even every single person in our life experience that daily in some capacity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so key as well, because sometimes you think, like, when you see those greatest speakers, you're like, oh, they look so confident and stuff. Like, I always, like, some of my top favorites, when I've seen like Tony Robbins, he's just walking around, looks like the strong man, doesn't look nervous at all. But it was so great for you to say that even the top speakers, they do feel the nerves. It does come, but to really name it and like claim and say, okay, do I feel nervous? Do I feel excited? And then to put other words as well, I am strong, and like to kind of reaffirm the feelings that you really want. And I like that you said that it's not a negative thing to feel nervous or to feel fearful. It is the feeling, that is what it is, and stuff, and harness it, and to work out how can you make that feeling feel good for you. Definitely. And I love that, definitely, because sometimes you think you're the only one who's got nerves or fear, and everybody else is so confident when they go out and speak, but it's not. And I like you mentioned about the human thing, about the sounds, the fillers, the oh, they say or she says this all the time, but that's natural, you know, and rather than being robots talking. Definitely. I love that. And then as well, kind of moving on from nerves and fear and kind of thinking and stuff, it's always mentioned whenever I see it online or when I've had conversations with people about the dreaded imposter syndrome. Do you have any thoughts on how do you manage it, or is the imposter syndrome even real as well? What do you think about that?
I 100% believe imposter syndrome is real. How do you manage it is something that it took me quite a while to figure out. And I feel like when I got into that role in the oil and gas industry, as we spoke about earlier, was really when I finally decided I'm not going to allow to give this power as much as I have been. Does that mean that it will go away? No. I believe that it will be there in some capacity as we move through our lives. And so a way that I've learned to manage it is to become friends with it. It's not there to hurt us necessarily or to hold us back necessarily. It's there to just point things out, and it's there to stretch our minds and to challenge us in new ways. If it wasn't there, how would we necessarily be going through life? So the imposter syndrome comes up when we have these moments of, well, who am I to do X, Y, and Z? Or why would anybody listen to me say or talk about these topics when there's already so many people out there? Or I can't enter the space because it's highly saturated, all of the things, not feeling good enough, not feeling credible enough, not having enough experience. And so the way that I have managed it is I named it. So my imposter syndrome has an actual name, and her name is
What's her name? Sorry?
Her name is Janet.
Janet.
Yes. And Janet and I have conversations daily. So when Janet pops up, I ask her to sit down at my table, or sometimes she will just bring her own chair and she'll sit down and say, okay, we're going to have this conversation. Who are you to actually be on this podcast today, for example? This is who I am. and you have that open dialogue. So again, it's not the feedback, it's having the open dialogue with that imposter syndrome, or if you want to name yours, I highly suggest it, because again, once we name something, we're able to speak to it or to face it or to address it. We put a name on something and we're much more aware of it then. So you have this open dialogue with your imposter syndrome. So if Janet came in and said, you know what, actually, I don't think that anybody's going to sign up for this program that you're offering. It doesn't feel that great, even though you've put so much energy and love behind it and poured yourself into this offer. Who's actually going to buy it? Because people aren't going to pay XYZ, all the things, we create our own rabbit hole because we get in our own way. So it's having that conversation and saying, okay, imposter syndrome, I recognize what you're saying, but can you show me evidence? Is there solid evidence? If there is, great, let's write it down. 9 times out of 10, when you ask yourself that question, you're stopped. That conversation will stop, because they're truly, I would say 80% of the time, there really isn't solid evidence that nobody is ever going to sign up to work with you.
Yeah.
Whoever can do that, right? And who created that belief? Is that your belief, or is that a belief of somebody else or some other experience that you have adopted? So when we have that open dialogue with our imposter syndrome, it starts to rewire our brains. It starts to really tap into those neural pathways and create new ones. So then maybe the next time that you launch a new offer, you recognize it so much quicker and you're ready to raise that red flag and say, I know that you're coming and I'm prepared for you. Here's what I have prepared. Here's evidence showing why people will sign up to work with me, why I am able to get this promotion, why I am worth the extra contract or a percentage of what I actually want to feel fulfilled. So I would say, 1, it will likely always be there. And 2, it's up to you to figure out how to manage it, but in a way that works for you. If that's journaling, if that's speaking out loud, that's talking to a trusted person in your life, if it's writing, creating voice recordings of yourself, but really have that open dialogue and create evidence for yourself that feels really good for you.
I love that. That's really, really helpful. I love that you said that. Become friends with your imposter syndrome and name her or him, so that it has like an identity. And I like that you said it's not a negative thing. It's someone who comes, and when you're just a question like, okay, can you sell that course? Can you write that book? Can you go negotiate that contract and stuff? And so Janet, I like that yours called Janet. I'm not sure what mine will be called. She lays out her evidence and she tries me, but like, okay, Janet, where's the evidence that I can't sell this course? Where's the evidence I can't? And then she's like,
Exactly. Yes. She almost goes silent. Sometimes she'll come back and rebuke things, but again, that's when you have that open dialogue. I want to share a quick story. I actually was talking to somebody in my life about this, and I made the comment of, there's nothing that I can't do. True. And I had an actual person in my life come back and say, well, being realistic about that though, you couldn't go tomorrow and be an astronaut, or you couldn't be an astronaut. And I said, well, why not? If that's something that I really wanted, if I wanted to put the love and energy behind it, and that was a true goal of mine, why couldn't I do that? Of course I could do that. Maybe not tomorrow, but I'll be an astronaut, because I can do anything I want. So it's really counteracting, and again, having that evidence with yourself, being who you want to be.
Definitely having the evidence from myself, definitely that is really, really key, rather than listening to, we'll call her Janet, what Janet says and what Janet lays out. Having my own evidence of, okay, thanks Janet for giving your suggestions, but here's how it's going to play out. I really love that. Kind of like, it kind of sets up for me like a kind of court scene where Janet's there saying, well, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you're like, well, can I just present my defense material, and it's this and this. That's how I kind of see it in my, because I like to visualize as well, and I definitely see it in that kind of scenario. I really, really love that. Imposter syndrome. I'm going to think of a name for my one. I like that yours is called Janet. Sure, I don't know what I'm going to call her.
You'll have to report back and let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just been so great, Marisa, to go through all of these different topics. And it's like we've kind of just touched surface level on so many things and stuff. And I'm really grateful you've come along today to share just even a touch of your expertise in all of these different topics and stuff. And I just wanted to know sort of around this time now, what else exciting things are you working on that our listeners might be interested, or what's coming up in the pipeline that you can share about with us?
Yes. So I actually just did some reformatting and I've opened up applications to work with me one-on-one. So if anybody is interested in that, they can apply directly on my website, which you can find at www.marisabailey.com. And you can also find me on Instagram, which is Marisa Renee Bailey, all one word. And I'm also working on something super exciting, which is the first time that I'm talking about it publicly here, is that I am creating a 6-month mastermind, which is set to launch in September. So if you have any interest or you feel called to want more information, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm so excited about this offer. It's something that I've wanted to create for probably going on 2 years now.
Wow.
So, yes.
That's exciting. It sounds like so many things are happening. Wow. I really love it. And so what I'll do is in the show notes, I'll put like your contact links so that all of our listeners can get hold of you and stuff. And just before we go, have you got any more final thoughts you wanted to share? If anything's come up in your mind that you wanted to tell our listeners?
Yeah. I have a really great quote that popped up in my mind a couple of weeks ago that's been really powerful for me as I've been navigating through life, but also as I've been navigating through my business and again creating these offers and really doing a deep reflection on my identity. And a thing that popped up for me was that if we ask questions from a place of fear, that the fear will answer. So it's doing that deep work in your mind and asking from a place of love, giving yourself that self-compassion, really practicing grace and patience with yourself, and understanding that when you ask questions of yourself, of others, from whatever you might believe in, is to just give yourself patience and give yourself grace, because you don't have to have it all figured out overnight. And anybody that ever says that they have it all, quote unquote, whatever it all is, figured out, then I would love to speak to that person, because our own, that's what makes everything so special for us.
Yeah.
Trust your
Yeah, definitely. I really, really love that. Just asking questions from a place, rather than asking questions from a place of fear, ask from a place of love, and that's who's going to answer. And I just love that. And just being kind to yourself, because it's always like, be kind to people, be kind, but just being kind to yourself, I think that definitely needs like so much more kind of women to definitely do that. Just really be kind to myself. Definitely. I love that. I hope all the listeners tapped into that point as well. And just really, I really enjoyed listening to everything you've said. I just felt like we just touched the tip of the iceberg today as well. So much information, so much knowledge and stuff. And you did drop your links as well, your social media links. So you hang out on Instagram and Facebook. Where else do you hang out? Are you on Twitter?
No, just Instagram and Facebook right now.
Great. Excellent. I will put those into the show notes and our listeners will definitely get hold of you. But thank you so much, Marisa, for coming along today. I've learned so much and taken so much notes, and I can't wait to hear back from our listeners what they thought. It's just been such a great time, and it's just been a pleasure to meet you. And I hope that this is the first of many of our chats on the podcast too.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.